On a misty morning, a young herbalist stumbles upon a bound and wounded man in the heart of the forest. Upon releasing him, she whispers the question that would echo in everyone. Who abandoned you here? What seemed like just an act of compassion transforms into a shocking revelation. He was the missing millionaire everyone was searching for. And the life of that village would never be the same after what he decided to do. The autumn morning wrapped itself around the Appalachian hills like a cold blanket, mist dancing between ancient oaks and maples, painted in vibrant reds and golds. Lily Morgan pulled her worn jacket tighter as she ventured deeper into the forest that bordered Willow Creek, a small village tucked away in the mountains of North Carolina where her family had lived for generations. At 26, Lily was known throughout the region for her remarkable knowledge of herbal medicine, a skill passed down through the women in her family since before her great-grandmother's time. The leather-bound journal tucked in her satchel contained handwritten recipes dating back over a century, its pages worn thin from constant use and reverence. Black cohosh should be just past the creek bend, she murmured to herself, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. The forest floor was carpeted with fallen leaves that crunched beneath her hiking boots as she navigated familiar paths, basket in hand. This morning's expedition was particularly important. Mrs. Sullivan's arthritis had worsened with the changing weather, and Lily needed specific plants that only grew in the higher elevation clearings. The silence of the forest was therapeutic, broken only by the occasional bird call and the distant gurgle of the creek. Lily found herself humming softly, an old Appalachian folk tune her grandmother taught her while showing her how to identify medicinal plants. These moments alone in nature were when she felt most connected to her heritage and purpose. As she crossed the narrow wooden bridge that spanned Blackwater Creek, something unusual caught her attention, a sound that didn't belong among the natural symphony of the forest. She paused, tilting her head to listen more carefully. There it was again, a muffled groan, distinctly human, coming from somewhere off the main path. "Hello?" Lily called out, setting her basket down on a flat rock. "Is someone there?" Another groan, louder this time, guided her through a dense thicket of rhododendron bushes. She pushed aside branches, her heart racing as she emerged into a small clearing she rarely visited. The sight before her stopped her cold. A man was bound to a massive oak tree, his wrists secured behind him with rough rope that had left angry red marks on his skin. A blindfold covered his eyes, and his once expensive clothing was torn and soiled. Despite the disheveled appearance, she could tell these weren't the clothes of a local. The fabric was too fine, the cut too precise. "Oh my God," Lily gasped, rushing forward. "Who did this to you?" The man flinched at her voice, his head jerking in her direction. "Who's there?" His voice was hoarse, likely from shouting for help. "I'm Lily," she said, already working at the knots that bound him. "I live nearby. I'm going to help you." Her fingers worked quickly, years of tying delicate bundles of herbs giving her dexterity with knots. "How long have you been out here?" I'm not sure," the man mumbled, his words slurring slightly. "Meeting. It went wrong. They took me from the hotel." As the ropes fell away, Lily gently removed the blindfold. The man squinted against even the muted forest light, his eyes struggling to focus. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair and features that might have been handsome, if not contorted by exhaustion and dehydration. "Can you stand?" she asked, offering her arm for support. He tried to rise but stumbled immediately, and Lily barely managed to catch him before he hit the ground. "Sorry," he muttered. "Dizzy. You're dehydrated and probably hypothermic," Lily assessed, noting his cold skin and confused state. "My cabin isn't far. Can you make it if you lean on me?" The journey back was slow and difficult. The man, who hadn't offered his name, could barely put one foot in front of the other. Twice they had to stop as he retched, bringing up nothing but bile. By the time they reached the small clearing where Lily's cabin stood, he was nearly unconscious, his weight becoming increasingly difficult for her to support. The cabin was modest but welcoming, smoke curling from the stone chimney. It sat at the edge of Willow Creek, close enough that Lily could hear the town's church bell on Sunday mornings, but far enough to give her the solitude she cherished. The medicinal herb garden surrounding it was meticulously maintained even now in the late autumn. "Almost there," she encouraged, helping him up the 3 wooden steps to her porch. Inside, she guided him to her small sofa near the fireplace, where embers still glowed from her morning fire. Moving quickly, Lily built up the fire, put a kettle on to boil, and gathered supplies. The man drifted in and out of consciousness as she worked, occasionally mumbling fragmented sentences about meetings and betrayal. She managed to get him to swallow a few sips of water before preparing a strong herbal tea with herbs known for their restorative properties. "This will help with the dehydration and shock," she explained, helping him hold the mug. "Small sips, please." As warmth returned to his body, the man became more lucid. His eyes, a deep brown that reminded Lily of rich soil, began to focus more clearly on his surroundings. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice stronger. "You're in my cabin just outside Willow Creek," Lily answered, applying a salve to his chafed wrists. "I found you tied to a tree about 2 miles into the forest." "Willow Creek," he repeated, frowning. "North Carolina?" "Yes," she confirmed. "How did you know?" He shook his head slowly. "I was in Asheville for a business meeting. 3 days ago, I think. Then everything went wrong." He winced as memories seemed to surface. "They drugged me. In my hotel room. I remember being forced into a van." "Who are they?" Lily asked, concern creasing her brow. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Everything's still fuzzy." He attempted to sit up straighter, grimacing with the effort. "I should contact my office. People will be looking for me." "Rest first," Lily insisted, gently pushing him back against the cushions. "You're in no condition to do anything right now. The phone lines have been down since yesterday's storm anyway, and cell service is spotty at best out here." He didn't have the strength to argue, his eyelids already growing heavy again. "Thank you," he murmured. "You probably saved my life." "What's your name?" Lily asked as she tucked a handmade quilt around him. "James," he managed before sleep claimed him. "James Harrington." The name meant nothing to Lily as she continued to tend to her unexpected patient. She bathed his face with a cool cloth, noting the fine lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and stress. His hands, though roughened by his ordeal, showed no calluses from physical labor, another sign he wasn't from around here. As evening approached, Lily prepared a simple broth, hoping James would be able to tolerate it when he woke. She'd planned to head into town that afternoon to deliver her remedies, but those plans would have to wait. Instead, she sent a quick text to her friend Sarah during a brief moment of cell service, asking her to let Mrs. Sullivan know her arthritis medicine would be delayed. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees and rattling the cabin's windows. A storm was coming. Lily added more wood to the fire and settled into her rocking chair with her grandmother's journal, occasionally glancing at the sleeping stranger on her sofa. She had no way of knowing that this man's presence in her cabin would soon change everything, not just for her, but for the entire community of Willow Creek. The forest had delivered him to her for a reason, and as the first raindrops began to tap against the roof, Lily felt a strange certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. For 3 days, James drifted between consciousness and fevered sleep in Lily's cabin. She treated him with herbal tinctures to reduce inflammation and fight infection, applying poultices to the rope burns on his wrists and ankles. The storm had intensified, bringing torrential rain that washed out the only road connecting Willow Creek to the nearest highway. Even if she had wanted to get James to a hospital, it would have been impossible. On the morning of the 4th day, Lily woke to find him sitting upright at her small kitchen table, studying her collection of dried herbs hanging from the ceiling beams. "You're up," she said, surprised to see him looking so much improved. "Thanks to you," James replied, his voice still rough but stronger than before. "Whatever you've been giving me seems to be working." Lily filled 2 mugs with fresh coffee from the pot on her wood stove. Echinacea and elderberry for the immune system, willow bark for pain and fever, and a few family secrets. She smiled, passing him a mug. "How much do you remember?" James wrapped his hands around the warm ceramic. "More than I did yesterday. I remember being in Asheville for a meeting with potential investors. My business partner, Victor, was acting strangely all day. That night, someone knocked on my hotel room door." He frowned, concentrating. "After that, just fragments. The van, men arguing, being left in the forest. Do you remember telling me your name?" He nodded. "James Harrington. And you're Lily?" "Morgan," she supplied. Lily Morgan. I should probably tell you that the phone lines are still down, and I haven't been able to get a cell signal since the storm started. But once the road's clear, I can drive you to Asheville to contact your people. James took a slow sip of coffee. Thank you. I'm sure my absence has been noticed by now. What kind of business are you in, Mr. Harrington? Lily asked, curious about the stranger she'd rescued. Please call me James, he insisted. I'm in textiles. Well, that's how it started. Now Harrington Enterprises has diversified into real estate development, technology, renewable energy. He paused, studying her. What about you? You seem to know a lot about medicinal plants. Lily explained her role as the community herbalist, how she'd learned from her grandmother, and how she provided natural remedies to many of Willow Creek's residents who couldn't afford conventional healthcare or were suspicious of modern medicine. It's not glamorous, she admitted, but it's fulfilling. The people here trust me. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Lily opened it to find Sarah Peterson, her closest friend and the owner of Willow Creek's only cafe. The road finally cleared enough for my truck to make it through, Sarah explained, stepping inside with a basket of fresh-baked goods. I was worried about you out here alone during the... She stopped abruptly, noticing James at the table. Oh, I didn't realize you had company. Lily quickly introduced them, explaining how she'd found James in the forest. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the information. James Harrington? She repeated, staring at him. As in Harrington Enterprises? The textile magnate? James looked uncomfortable with the recognition. You've heard of me? Sarah laughed incredulously. Heard of you? Your company owns half the textile mills in this part of the state. You're practically a legend in these parts. Most people around here have family who work for you, or used to before the Riverside Mill closed. Lily looked between them, confused. What are you talking about, Sarah? Lily, you don't watch the news enough, Sarah chided. Mr. Harrington here is one of the wealthiest businessmen in the Southeast. There was a story just yesterday about his mysterious disappearance. The police suspect foul play. James winced slightly. I'd appreciate if you didn't spread word of my whereabouts just yet. Not until I understand what happened and who was behind it. Sarah mimed, zipping her lips. Your secret's safe with me, but it won't stay secret for long in a town like Willow Creek. News travels faster than lightning here. After Sarah left, promising to return with supplies, an awkward silence fell between Lily and James. So you're some kind of millionaire tycoon, Lily finally said, unable to reconcile this information with the vulnerable man she'd been nursing back to health. Billionaire. Actually, James corrected without pride, though I've never cared much for labels, does it matter? Lily considered the question. I suppose not. You were a man who needed help regardless of your bank account. She began gathering herbs from her drying racks. But I am curious why someone would kidnap you and leave you in our forest of all places. I've been wondering the same thing, James admitted. This area means something to you, but I don't have any connection to Willow Creek that I know of. By mid-afternoon, James felt strong enough to accompany Lily into town. She lent him clean clothes that belonged to her brother, who occasionally stayed with her between his contract jobs as a forest ranger. The jeans and flannel shirt were a far cry from James's usual tailored suits, but they served the purpose. Willow Creek revealed itself as they descended the winding forest road in Lily's ancient pickup truck. The small town was nestled in a valley, surrounded by the vibrant autumn colors of the Appalachian forest. A single main street housed most of the businesses: Sarah's Cafe, a general store, a small library, and a handful of other establishments. Church spires rose above the tree line, and modest homes spread outward from the town center. It's beautiful, James commented, genuinely impressed by the picturesque setting. It's home, Lily replied simply. Not much compared to the cities you're used to, I'm sure. There's something to be said for simplicity, he mused, watching as they passed a group of children playing in piles of fallen leaves. The truck had barely stopped in front of the general store when people began to emerge, curious about the unfamiliar face beside Lily. Word of Sarah's discovery had spread rapidly. Mayor Robert Thompson was the first to approach, his considerable girth preceding him as he hustled across the street. Miss Morgan, heard you had quite the adventure in the forest. His gaze fixed on James with undisguised interest. And you must be Mr. Harrington, Robert Thompson, mayor of our humble town. He extended a meaty hand. James shook it firmly. Pleased to meet you, Mayor. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered. James found himself surrounded by townspeople, all eager to meet the famous businessman who had mysteriously appeared in their forest. Lily watched with amusement as he handled the attention with surprising grace, answering questions politely but vaguely about his ordeal. We should contact the authorities, Mayor Thompson insisted. A man of your stature kidnapped. This is serious business. I appreciate your concern, James replied diplomatically, but I'd like to recover fully before dealing with police and press. Ms. Morgan has been kind enough to offer her hospitality while I regain my strength. The town's reaction to James's presence was mixed. Some, like Mayor Thompson, saw potential opportunity in having a wealthy businessman in their midst. Others, particularly the older residents, were more reserved, viewing outsiders with traditional Appalachian suspicion. As evening approached, Lily and James found themselves at Sarah's cafe, which had stayed open late, especially for them. The cozy establishment was filled with the aroma of fresh bread and coffee. So, Mr. Harrington, Sarah said as she refilled their cups, what do you think of our little corner of the world? It's charming, he answered honestly. There's an authenticity here that's rare these days. Sarah nodded approvingly. Willow Creek has its challenges, but we take care of our own. Speaking of which, she lowered her voice, have you heard about Thornhill Resorts buying up land around here? They're planning some massive development that could change everything. James frowned. Thornhill? I know them. They specialize in luxury resorts and golf courses. Well, they've been pressuring folks to sell, Sarah continued. Some already have. Can't blame them with the prices being offered, but if they get their way, Willow Creek as we know it will disappear. Lily watched James's expression carefully as he processed this information. Something flickered in his eyes, recognition perhaps, or concern. Do you know something about this, James? She asked quietly. He met her gaze directly. I might. Thornhill is a subsidiary of a larger investment group. I'd need to check my holdings to be certain, but he hesitated. It's possible I have a stake in this development without knowing the specifics. The revelation hung in the air between them, suddenly casting James in a different light. Lily wondered if his appearance in their forest was truly as random as it had seemed, or if some greater force was at work, bringing together two worlds that were never meant to intersect. As they drove back to Lily's cabin under a canopy of stars, neither spoke. James stared out the window at the dark silhouettes of trees against the night sky, his mind clearly churning with new information and possibilities. Lily gripped the steering wheel tightly, suddenly uncertain about the man beside her and what his presence might mean for her beloved community. The following day, James insisted on helping Lily organize her herb collection, a task she usually undertook alone each autumn. They worked in comfortable silence, sorting dried plants into labeled glass jars, while rain pattered gently against the cabin's windows. You've created quite a pharmacy here, James observed, carefully placing a jar of dried chamomile on a shelf. Did you learn all this from your grandmother? Lily nodded, her fingers expertly tying a bundle of lavender with twine. Eleanor Morgan was the best herbalist these mountains ever knew. People came from 3 counties over seeking her remedies. Pride colored her voice. She could look at a person and know exactly what ailed them, sometimes before they even knew themselves. She sounds remarkable, James said. Is she still alive? No, Lily replied softly. She passed away 5 years ago. Left me this cabin, her journals, and the responsibility of carrying on her work. She gestured to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, an elderly woman with intelligent eyes and Lily's same auburn hair, standing proudly in a lush garden. James moved closer to examine the photograph, then suddenly froze. His expression changed, color draining from his face as he stared at Eleanor Morgan's image. James, Lily asked, concerned by his reaction. Are you all right? He picked up the frame with trembling hands. This woman, your grandmother. I know her. His voice was barely audible. Or I did many years ago. Lily set down her herbs. That's impossible. Gramps rarely left Willow Creek, especially in her later years. Not here, James clarified, still transfixed by the photograph. In Boston, during my early business days, Eleanor Bradford was her name then. She was my mentor, my first investor. He looked at Lily with astonishment. She's the reason Harrington Enterprises exists at all. Disbelief washed over Lily. Bradford was her maiden name, but Grandma never mentioned Boston or you. The coincidence seemed too great to be believable. There must be some mistake. No mistake, James insisted. I'd know those eyes anywhere. She had this way of looking right through you, seeing potential no one else could see. He set the photograph down carefully. Eleanor believed in me when no one else would. She invested her family inheritance in my first textile mill when every bank in Boston had turned me down. Lily's mind raced, trying to reconcile this revelation with what she knew of her grandmother. She never spoke about a life before Willow Creek. I always assumed she was born here like the rest of us. May I see those journals you mentioned? James asked. Hesitantly, Lily retrieved a wooden chest from beneath her bed. Inside were dozens of leather-bound books, each filled with Eleanor's meticulous handwriting, recipes for tinctures and salves alongside personal reflections. These are private, Lily warned as she handed him the earliest volume. But if what you're saying is true, maybe there's something in here that explains the connection. They spent hours poring over the journals, working backward through Eleanor's life. Most entries focused on herbal knowledge and observations of the natural world, but as they reached the oldest journals, the tone changed. Here were the writings of a younger woman, ambitious and determined, chronicling her life in Boston's business world during the late 1970s. April 15, 1978, James read aloud from a yellowed page. Met with young James Harrington again today regarding his textile venture. The boy has raw talent and vision beyond his years. I've decided to back him, despite Robert's objections. Some risks are worth taking. He looked up, eyes bright with emotion. This was the day she agreed to fund my first mill. Lily found herself unable to speak, confronted with a side of her grandmother she'd never known. A savvy businesswoman who had once moved in circles far removed from the simple mountain life she'd later embraced. As they continued reading, a story emerged of partnership and mentorship that eventually soured. Eleanor's entries became increasingly concerned about the direction of Harrington Enterprises, with references to disagreements over business practices and ethical considerations. October 3rd, 1982, Lily read from a later volume. Final meeting with James today. He refuses to honor our agreement regarding the Carolina operations. Claims market forces necessitate the changes, but I fear greed has clouded the idealistic young man I once knew. My shares have been sold. This chapter closes with disappointment rather than the pride I once felt. James winced at the words. I remember that meeting. We were expanding rapidly, and I wanted to consolidate operations. It meant closing a historic mill in North Carolina that was underperforming. He shook his head regretfully. Eleanor was furious. She accused me of betraying the communities that had made our success possible. Was this mill in Willow Creek? Lily asked, suddenly making the connection. Not initially, James admitted. But the Riverside Mill that eventually closed here 10 years ago was part of that same consolidation strategy Eleanor opposed. I never made the connection until now. The pieces began falling into place. Eleanor Bradford had invested in James's business, fought him over the closure of mills in small communities, then sold her shares in protest. Afterward, she had retreated to Willow Creek, likely drawn by its connection to the textile industry she had tried to protect, changed back to her maiden name, and built a new life focused on traditional healing and simplicity. She never told me any of this, Lily whispered, feeling as though the foundations of her understanding had shifted. Why would she keep her past hidden? Perhaps she wanted to leave that world behind completely, James suggested. From what I'm reading here, she found more fulfillment in healing and connecting with nature than she ever did in boardrooms. As evening descended, they continued their exploration of Eleanor's journals, piecing together the remarkable journey of a woman who had walked in two vastly different worlds. They discovered that after leaving Boston, Eleanor had married a local craftsman in Willow Creek, Henry Morgan, and embraced the traditional knowledge of Appalachian herbalism passed down through his family. Wait, James said suddenly, pausing over an entry from 1983. Listen to this. Found the deed today while organizing Henry's family papers. The true ownership of the Valley lands has been obscured, hidden in plain sight for nearly a century. This knowledge is both power and burden. I must consider carefully how to proceed. Lily leaned closer. What Valley lands? What deed? I don't know, James admitted. But it sounds like she discovered something significant about property ownership around here. They searched the remaining journals for more information, but found only vague references to the papers and the truth about the Valley. Whatever Eleanor had discovered, she had been cautious about committing details to writing. Could this have something to do with the Thornhill development? Lily wondered aloud. If Grandma found documents about land ownership, maybe they're still here somewhere. Together, they began searching the cabin, looking for hidden compartments or secret storage spaces where Eleanor might have kept important papers. Their search led them to the attic, a space Lily rarely entered, filled with dust-covered trunks and boxes of family memorabilia. I haven't been through most of this since she passed, Lily admitted. Running her fingers along an old steamer trunk, it felt too personal, too final. James helped her open the heavy lid, revealing neatly folded quilts atop layers of carefully preserved memories. They worked methodically, examining each item with respect for the life it represented. Near the bottom of the third trunk, beneath a wedding dress wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, they found a metal lockbox. Do you have a key for this? James asked. Lily shook her head. I've never seen it before. After several minutes of searching, they discovered a small key taped to the underside of the trunk's lid, hidden in plain sight, just as Eleanor's journal had mentioned. With trembling hands, Lily unlocked the box. Inside were dozens of documents, old land surveys, property deeds, newspaper clippings, and legal correspondence. Most significant was a folder labeled Willow Creek Township, Original Land Grant. 1842. These are the original deeds to the entire valley, Lily breathed, carefully unfolding brittle documents. According to this, the land was granted to the founding families of Willow Creek as a cooperative holding. They were textile workers who established their own community after the bankruptcy of their previous employer. James studied the papers with growing interest. This changes everything about the current development plans. If these documents are legally sound, the corporate purchase of individual properties might not be valid without approval from all descendants of the original cooperative, which would include almost everyone still living in Willow Creek, Lily realized. As they continued examining the contents of the lockbox, another document caught their attention, a letter addressed to Lily, written in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting, but never delivered. My dearest Lily, she read aloud, her voice thick with emotion. If you are reading this, you have discovered what I found all those years ago. The truth about Willow Creek's lands has been buried for generations, but perhaps the time for revelation is approaching. The valley has been protected by its obscurity, but change is inevitable. When that time comes, you will need allies, even from unexpected places. Trust your instincts as I have always trusted mine. The healing path sometimes leads through difficult terrain. Lily looked up from the letter to find James watching her intently. In the golden light of the attic's single bulb, she saw something in his expression that mirrored her own feelings, a sense of pieces falling into place, of connections transcending time and circumstance. Your grandmother brought us together, he said quietly. Somehow, after all these years, she's still guiding both of us. The revelation hung between them like a tangible thing, reshaping their understanding of each other and their unlikely meeting in the forest. What had seemed like random chance now appeared to be part of a larger design, orchestrated by a woman who had seen potential and possibility where others saw only profit or tradition. As they carefully returned the documents to the lockbox, thunder rolled across the mountains, a deep resonant sound that seemed to affirm the significance of their discovery. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain lashing against the cabin's roof with renewed intensity. We should get back. Downstairs, Lily suggested, clutching the precious box. We have a lot to discuss. James nodded, helping her navigate the narrow attic stairs. Indeed we do. And I think decisions to make as well. The weight of Eleanor's legacy descended with them, a responsibility neither had anticipated, but both now felt bound to honor. The next morning dawned clear after the storm, the autumn air scrubbed clean and crisp. James stood on Lily's porch, coffee mug in hand, gazing at the vibrant tapestry of the forest. A week ago, he had been in his penthouse office in Atlanta, surrounded by glass and steel, making decisions that affected thousands of lives with clinical detachment. Now he found himself deeply invested in the fate of a tiny mountain community he'd never given a second thought to before. "Penny for your thoughts," Lily said, joining him on the porch with her own steaming mug. "I'm trying to reconcile two worlds," James admitted. "The businessman in me sees Willow Creek as a prime development opportunity, unspoiled scenery, authentic charm, proximity to Asheville's tourist market. The man who spent the last week here sees something far more valuable that can't be quantified on a balance sheet." Lily leaned against the railing. "And which perspective is winning?" James turned to look at her, struck again by how her features reminded him of Eleanor. Not physically, but in the directness of her gaze that seemed to demand honesty. "I'm not sure yet," he answered truthfully. "But I think your grandmother knew this moment would come eventually. She prepared for it, left these breadcrumbs for us to follow." They had spent most of the night examining the documents from Eleanor's lockbox, piecing together the legal history of Willow Creek. The original land grant established the entire valley as a cooperative township, owned collectively by the founding families who had fled the harsh conditions of New England textile mills to establish their own community in the mountains. Over generations, the legal structure had been forgotten, with individual families assuming private ownership of their parcels without understanding the cooperative framework that still technically governed the entire valley. "We need to bring this to the town," Lily said. "Today's Saturday, perfect timing for an impromptu town meeting." James hesitated. "Are you sure that's wise? Some of these people have already sold their land to Thornhill. Learning it wasn't legally theirs to sell could create chaos." "Maybe chaos is exactly what's needed to stop this development," Lily countered. "Besides, Willow Creek deserves to know its true history." By mid-morning, they had arranged an emergency community meeting at the town hall, a modest building that had once been the community's schoolhouse. Mayor Thompson was initially reluctant, but the mention of historical documents affecting property rights had piqued his interest enough to make the calls. Word spread quickly. By 2 o'clock, the hall was packed with curious residents, many of whom had never attended a town meeting before. The wooden pews that served as seating were filled beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and spilling out onto the front steps. As Lily prepared to address her neighbors, nervousness threatened to overwhelm her. She had never been one for public speaking, preferring the quiet solitude of her cabin and the one-on-one interactions of her healing practice. James noticed her apprehension and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Just tell them the truth," he whispered. "That's all they need." Lily took a deep breath and stepped forward. With remarkable clarity, she explained Eleanor's discovery and the implications for Willow Creek. She described the original cooperative structure, how it had been obscured over time, and how the current development plans might be legally challenged based on these historical documents. The reaction was immediate and divided. Older residents nodded in recognition, as if some half-remembered family stories were suddenly making sense. Those who had already sold their land to Thornhill looked alarmed, while others seemed cautiously hopeful about the possibility of stopping the development. "This is preposterous." Frank Wilson, the town's only real estate agent and a vocal supporter of the Thornhill project, stood up angrily. "These documents are over 150 years old. Modern property law supersedes whatever arrangement those original settlers made." "Not necessarily," countered Margaret Jenkins, a retired history teacher. "If the cooperative was never legally dissolved, and if transactions over the generations failed to acknowledge the underlying structure, there could be grounds for challenging the recent sales." The debate grew heated, with neighbors who had lived peacefully side by side for decades suddenly finding themselves on opposite sides of a divide. Mayor Thompson struggled to maintain order, his political instincts clearly torn between the potential for economic development and the grassroots opposition forming before his eyes. James remained silent throughout most of the discussion, observing the community dynamics with keen interest. These were the very people whose livelihoods his business decisions had affected over the years, people he had never met, whose faces he had never seen when reviewing spreadsheets and approving mill closures. Finally, as the meeting threatened to dissolve into unproductive argument, James stood up. The room quieted immediately, curiosity about the famous outsider overriding the tension of the moment. "If I may," he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to boardroom presentations. "I believe there might be a middle path here worth exploring," he explained, his connection to Eleanor Bradford Morgan and his own unexpected stake in the situation. Without revealing his potential ownership interest in Thornhill's parent company, he outlined a vision for Willow Creek that balanced preservation with prosperity. What makes this place special isn't just its natural beauty, but its living heritage, the crafts, the healing traditions, the sense of community that's been maintained for generations. Any development that destroys that essence destroys the very thing that makes it valuable in the first place. James proposed a community task force to research the legal implications of Eleanor's documents and to develop an alternative plan for Willow Creek's future, one that would protect its character while creating sustainable economic opportunities for residents. "I have resources that could be helpful in this process," he offered. "Legal expertise, business connections, perhaps even investment capital if the right project emerges." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly. Even those who had been skeptical seemed intrigued by the possibility of charting their own course, rather than simply resisting an imposed future or surrendering to outside interests. As the meeting adjourned, people clustered in animated conversation, the seed of possibility having taken root. Lily watched in amazement as James moved easily among her neighbors, listening to their concerns and ideas with genuine interest. This was a different man than the wounded stranger she had found in the forest, or even the polished businessman who had first revealed himself. This James Harrington seemed to be integrating both worlds, finding a new center in the process. Later, as they walked back to Lily's cabin in the golden afternoon light, she voiced her observation. "You surprised me today," she admitted. "I didn't expect you to take such an active role." James smiled ruefully. "I surprised myself. A week ago, I would have seen this situation purely as a business matter. Numbers on a page, assets and liabilities, risk and return. And now?" He gestured to the vista before them, the rolling mountains painted in autumn colors, the small cluster of buildings that made up Willow Creek, nestled in the valley below. "Now I see people with hopes and histories. I see a way of life that has value beyond monetary measurement. And I see an opportunity to right some wrongs, including perhaps the ones that drove your grandmother away from me all those years ago." That evening, they sat on Lily's porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the meadow as dusk settled over the mountains. The air had turned cooler, and Lily had draped one of her grandmother's quilts over their laps. The simple intimacy of the moment was not lost on either of them. "Tell me about your life before Willow Creek," James asked. Eleanor's journals mentioned a granddaughter studying medicine at Vanderbilt. "Was that you?" Lily nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant horizon. 3 years of medical school. I was on track to become a surgeon. Top of my class, prestigious residency lined up." "What happened?" "Grandma got sick. Pancreatic cancer, advanced when they found it. I came home to take care of her." Lily's voice softened with memory. "Those last months with her changed everything. I watched her heal people until her final days, using knowledge that would never be taught in medical school. When she was gone, I couldn't bring myself to return to that sterile world of fluorescent lights and pharmaceutical solutions." "Do you regret it?" James asked gently. Lily considered the question. "Sometimes I wonder about the path not taken. But no, I don't regret staying. This is where I belong." They fell into comfortable silence, the rhythm of the swing hypnotic under the emerging stars. The events of the day had left them both emotionally drained, but oddly invigorated, as if they stood on the threshold of something significant. "What about you?" Lily finally asked. "Any regrets in your rise to the top?" James didn't answer immediately, weighing honesty against pride. "More than I can count," he admitted eventually. "The man your grandmother invested in had principles and vision beyond wealth. Somewhere along the way, success became its own justification. Efficiency and growth became the only metrics that mattered. And now I find myself kidnapped, abandoned in a forest and rescued by the granddaughter of the mentor I disappointed. He laughed softly at the cosmic irony. If that's not the universe offering a chance at redemption, I don't know what is. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Headlights swept the darkness as a black SUV with government plates pulled up in front of the cabin. Two men in suits emerged, their formal appearance incongruous against the rustic setting. "Mr. Harrington?" one called out, squinting toward the porch. "FBI, sir. We've been looking for you." James and Lily exchanged a glance that communicated volumes. Their peaceful interlude was ending, and the complications of the outside world had arrived on their doorstep. Whatever path they had begun to forge together was about to face its first significant test. "I suppose we knew this moment would come," James said quietly, standing to greet the agents. But his hand lingered on Lily's shoulder, a silent promise that this interruption would not be the end of their story, but merely a new chapter beginning. The FBI agents, Specialists Cooper and Ramirez, sat at Lily's kitchen table, their notepads and recording devices creating an island of officialdom in the rustic cabin. James recounted his ordeal with the detached precision of someone giving a business presentation, careful to include every detail he could remember without emotion coloring the facts. "And you have no idea why you were targeted, Mr. Harrington?" Agent Cooper asked, his pen poised above his notepad. "My initial assumption was that it was a straightforward kidnapping for ransom," James replied. "But no demands were ever made, at least not to my knowledge." Agent Ramirez, the younger of the two, leaned forward. "Your executive assistant received a call the day after your disappearance from someone claiming to represent concerned investors. They didn't ask for money, but rather for her to release certain files from your personal server." This new information visibly startled James. "What files?" "She didn't comply," Ramirez continued. "Instead, she contacted the authorities. The call was traced to a burner phone purchased in Asheville." James's mind raced through possibilities. The timing aligned with his review of the Thornhill Resort project, including land acquisitions in Willow Creek. He had been investigating discrepancies in the reporting structure, properties being purchased through a complex web of shell companies that obscured the ultimate ownership. "I think I know what they were after," he said slowly. "I'd been looking into some irregularities with a development project. Nothing illegal necessarily, but unusual enough to raise questions." "The Thornhill Resort development?" Agent Cooper asked, surprising both James and Lily with his specific knowledge. James nodded. "You've done your homework. When a man of your prominence disappears, Mr. Harrington, we look at all his recent activities. Your assistant mentioned you'd been particularly interested in that project." The conversation continued for another hour, with the agents gathering details about James's kidnapping and his subsequent rescue by Lily. They seemed particularly interested in the fact that he had been abandoned so close to Willow Creek, of all places. "It seems like an unusual coincidence," Agent Ramirez observed, "being left near a town connected to a project you were investigating." "The universe works in mysterious ways," Lily interjected, speaking up for the first time since the questioning began. Both agents turned to look at her with professional curiosity. "Ms. Morgan, you mentioned finding Mr. Harrington while foraging for herbs," Cooper said. "Do you often venture that deep into the forest?" "When necessary," she replied evenly. "Certain plants only grow in specific conditions. I go where the medicine is." The agents exchanged a glance that suggested they found her explanation quaint, but accepted it. After collecting contact information and instructing James to remain available for further questioning, they prepared to leave. "We'll need you to come to our field office in Asheville tomorrow to make a formal statement, Mr. Harrington," Cooper said. "We can provide transportation." "That won't be necessary," James replied. "I'll drive myself," he glanced at Lily. "If I could borrow your truck." After the agents departed, the cabin seemed unnaturally quiet. Lily busied herself making tea, while James stared out the window, watching the government SUV disappear down the forest road. "You didn't tell them everything," Lily observed, setting a steaming mug before him. James turned from the window. "No, I didn't mention Eleanor's documents or the town meeting. That's Willow Creek's business, not the FBI's, at least for now. And the Thornhill connection? James sighed, running a hand through his hair. That's more complicated. I need to get back to Atlanta, access my secure files. Something doesn't add up. You're leaving then? It wasn't a question. I have to, he said gently, but not permanently. What we've started here's both with the town and... He hesitated. Between us, I want to see where it leads. Lily nodded, maintaining her composure, despite the unexpected pang of loss she felt at the thought of his departure. I understand. You have a life to return to. A life that seems increasingly hollow compared to what I've experienced this past week, James admitted. But also resources that could help Willow Creek. I can do more for this community from my office than from your porch swing, as much as I might prefer the latter. The next morning, James borrowed Lily's truck to drive to Asheville. After giving his statement to the FBI, he checked into a hotel, using his recovered credit cards to purchase new clothes and necessities. He called his executive assistant, Andrea Phillips, who had been managing the company in his absence. "Thank God you're all right," Andrea said, the relief evident in her voice. "The board has been in chaos. Victor's been pushing for emergency powers to make decisions in your absence." Victor, James repeated, the name of his business partner and oldest friend suddenly carrying new weight. "What's his interest in the Thornhill project?" There was a pause on the line. "That's the strange thing. He's been obsessed with it, insisting we move forward despite your reservations. He even tried to access your private server after you disappeared. Did he succeed?" "No. The security protocols you set up required dual authentication from both you and me." James felt a cold certainty settling in his stomach. "Andrea, I need you to do something for me, but keep it absolutely confidential. Pull all the incorporation documents for Thornhill Resorts and every subsidiary company involved in the Willow Creek project. And check Victor's calendar for the week before I disappeared. Any meetings in Asheville or with Thornhill executives. You think Victor was involved in your kidnapping?" Andrea's voice dropped to a whisper, the implications sinking in. "I hope not," James replied grimly, "but I intend to find out." While waiting for Andrea's research, James made another call to his personal attorney, Benjamin Hayes, a shrewd litigator who had been with him since the early days of Harrington Enterprises. "Ben, I need you to review some historical property documents. They concern a cooperative land ownership structure from the 1840s that might invalidate recent property transactions in a town called Willow Creek." 2 days later, armed with information from both Andrea and Ben, James returned to Willow Creek. The morning was misty as he parked in front of the town hall, where the community task force was having its first meeting. He entered quietly, taking a seat at the back of the room as Mayor Thompson led a discussion about engaging legal counsel to review Eleanor's documents. When the debate reached a natural pause, James stood. All heads turned toward him, expressions ranging from surprise to relief at his return. "If I may," he began, moving to the front of the room, "I've had some research done on the documents Ms. Morgan discovered." For the next hour, James presented what he had learned. According to his attorney, the original cooperative structure of Willow Creek remained legally valid, having never been properly dissolved. This meant that the individual sales to Thornhill could be challenged in court, potentially halting the development. "But there's more," James continued, his expression grave. "The Thornhill project isn't what it appears to be. On paper, they're planning a luxury resort, but the environmental impact studies and construction plans tell a different story." He unfolded a large map on the table, pointing to areas marked in red. "These sections are slated for industrial development, not hotel rooms or golf courses, but manufacturing facilities, specifically textile processing plants that would use the mountain watershed for waste disposal." A shocked murmur ran through the room. Willow Creek had a proud textile heritage, but the industry's environmental impact was well known to these mountain people who valued their clean air and water. "Why would they hide their true intentions?" Sarah asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "Because they knew you wouldn't sell for that purpose," James explained. "And because the shell game of corporations makes it nearly impossible to see who really owns what." "Almost impossible," he amended with a grim smile. "Unless you know where to look." With methodical precision, James traced the ownership of Thornhill Resorts through a dozen subsidiary companies, ultimately revealing the controlling interest, a holding company called VR Investments. VR stands for Victor Reynolds, James said quietly. My business partner, and it seems the man who arranged my kidnapping when I got too close to uncovering his scheme. The revelation landed like a thunderclap in the room. James had not just returned with legal ammunition for their fight. He had exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of corporate America. So what happens now? Lily asked from her seat near the window, speaking for the first time since James's return. Now, James replied, meeting her gaze, we fight. On legal grounds, using Eleanor's documents to challenge the sales. On regulatory grounds, exposing the true nature of the development plans. And he added with steel in his voice, on personal grounds by holding those responsible accountable for their actions. The meeting adjourned with a new sense of purpose and unity. The task force divided into committees, each focusing on a different aspect of their strategy. As people filed out, energized by the clear path forward, Lily approached James. You came back, she said simply, and I promised I would. And brought a war with you, she added. But there was no accusation in her tone, only pragmatic observation. I'm sorry about that, James said sincerely. Victor's obsession with this project, his willingness to have me kidnapped to protect it, I still can't fully make sense of it. Lily considered this. Maybe it's not just about business for him either. This valley seems to have a way of becoming personal for people. As they left the town hall together, they were approached by FBI agent Cooper, who had been waiting outside. Mr. Harrington, Miss Morgan, he greeted them. We've made an arrest in connection with your kidnapping. A man named Eric Daniels, head of security for VR Investments. James exchanged a significant look with Lily. And Victor Reynolds? We're bringing him in for questioning, Cooper confirmed. But we have a problem. The paperwork that would directly implicate him has disappeared from the company servers. Not all of it, James replied. I kept backups of the most sensitive files, including communications about Willow Creek. I'll have them sent to your office immediately. As Cooper departed with this new information, Lily turned to James with newfound respect in her eyes. You were always one step ahead. A lesson from your grandmother, James admitted. Eleanor always told me to trust people but verify everything. It was good business advice then. Now it might just save this town. They walked together through Willow Creek's main street, where autumn decorations adorned storefronts and children played in piles of golden leaves. The community around them had no idea how close it had come to destruction, or that its salvation had begun with a young herbalist following her intuition into the forest on a misty morning. What will happen to your company with Victor gone? Lily asked as they reached the edge of town. James looked out over the valley, considering the future. A restructuring, certainly. Perhaps a return to first principles. He glanced at her. Eleanor had a vision for ethical business that I lost sight of over the years. Maybe it's time to find it again. The implication hung between them, that his redemption and Willow Creek's preservation might be intertwined, part of the same unlikely story that had begun with ropes and blindfolds in the autumn woods. The weeks following Victor's arrest unfolded in a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. Willow Creek, accustomed to the quiet rhythm of mountain life, found itself thrust into the national spotlight as the story captured public imagination. A billionaire businessman kidnapped and left for dead, rescued by a mountain healer, uncovering a corporate conspiracy threatening a historic Appalachian community. James divided his time between Atlanta, where he worked to stabilize his company in the wake of Victor's betrayal, and Willow Creek, where he had rented a small cabin by the river. The dual existence suited him, allowing him to leverage his corporate resources for the town's benefit, while continuing to experience the simpler life that had begun to heal something long broken within him. Lily, meanwhile, found herself in an unexpected role as the town's unofficial spokesperson. Her articulate defense of Willow Creek's heritage and her compelling personal story made her the perfect representative for media interviews. Though initially uncomfortable with the attention, she grew into the role, recognizing the power of narrative in shaping public opinion. You're a natural, James observed one evening after watching her interview on a national news program. They were sitting on the bank of Willow Creek, sharing a simple dinner of fresh trout and foraged greens. The November air had turned cold, but they were warm in heavy sweaters beside a small campfire. Lily laughed. "Hardly, I'm just telling our truth. People respond to that." "Our truth," James repeated, noticing her choice of words. "So I'm part of the hour now?" She looked at him thoughtfully. "Aren't you? You've spent more time here than in Atlanta this month. You know Mrs. Patterson's arthritis acts up when rain is coming better than her own husband does. You can identify 5 medicinal plants that most locals have forgotten about." 6, he corrected with a smile. "I found some golden seal yesterday on the North Ridge." "My point exactly." She nudged his shoulder playfully. "You've gone native, Mr. Harrington." The easy camaraderie between them had deepened over the weeks into something neither was quite ready to name. They worked together daily on the community's legal defense, spent evenings exploring the forest or discussing Eleanor's journals, and had fallen into the comfortable rhythms of people who understood each other on a fundamental level. Yet there remained an unspoken awareness of the differences in their worlds. His corporate empire in Atlanta, with its boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, her simple healing practice and deep connection to this specific place and its people. The question of where their paths might ultimately lead hovered between them, acknowledged but unaddressed. "I've been thinking about Eleanor's formulas," James said, changing the subject. "Particularly her arthritis salve. Have you ever considered having it analyzed in a proper laboratory?" Lily stiffened slightly. "Why would I do that?" "It works as it is. People trust it." "Of course," James backtracked, sensing her defensiveness. "I just wonder if there might be compounds in it that could help more people if we understood the science behind them." "We," Lily repeated, raising an eyebrow. James set his plate aside, turning to face her directly. "I've had an idea brewing, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up. What would you think about establishing a research center here in Willow Creek? Not a big corporate facility, but a place where traditional knowledge like yours could be studied, documented, and potentially developed into treatments that could reach more people while remaining true to their origins." Lily was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "You're talking about commercializing my grandmother's remedies. I'm talking about honoring her legacy by ensuring her knowledge isn't lost," James countered gently, "and creating sustainable economic opportunities for Willow Creek that align with its values rather than destroying them." The idea wasn't entirely new to Lily. She had sometimes wondered what would happen to the knowledge she carried when she was gone. Unlike her grandmother, she had no apprentice, no next generation to whom she was passing these skills. Who would control it? She asked finally. Who would decide which remedies to develop, how they would be used? "So you would," James said simply, "along with a council of community elders if you wanted. I could provide funding and infrastructure, but the intellectual property would remain with you and Willow Creek." The conversation continued late into the night, exploring possibilities, addressing concerns, and gradually shaping a vision that excited them both. By the time they extinguished the campfire and walked back toward town under a canopy of stars, a new path forward had begun to materialize, one that neither had imagined when they first met in the forest. The following morning, as frost sparkled on the meadow grasses, Lily received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Eliza Chen, a renowned ethnobotanist from the University of North Carolina, arrived unannounced at Lily's cabin. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion," Dr. Chen said after introducing herself, "but I've been following the Willow Creek story, and when I heard about your herbal practice, I knew I had to meet you." Lily invited her in, curious but cautious. "How did you find me?" "The cafe owner in town, Sarah, I believe, pointed me in the right direction. She's quite protective of you, made me promise I wasn't a reporter before telling me anything." Over tea, Dr. Chen explained her interest. She had spent her career documenting traditional healing practices around the world, particularly those in danger of being lost as elder practitioners passed away without adequately transmitting their knowledge. "What you're doing here is exactly the kind of living tradition my research focuses on," she explained enthusiastically. "Appalachian herbalism has roots in European, Native American, and African healing traditions, a unique cultural synthesis that deserves preservation and study. Lily found herself warming to the passionate academic, whose genuine respect for traditional knowledge was evident in every question she asked. When Dr. Chen requested a tour of Lily's herb garden and preparation area, she agreed readily. As they walked among the carefully tended plants, many now dormant for winter, Dr. Chen stopped suddenly, kneeling to examine a particular bed where green shoots persisted despite the season. "Is this black cohosh cultivated from wild stock?" she asked, her voice tinged with excitement. "Yes," Lily confirmed. "My grandmother started this patch 30 years ago from plants she rescued when logging threatened their natural habitat." Dr. Chen's expression grew serious. "Ms. Morgan, do you realize what you have here? This appears to be a variant I've never seen documented. The leaf structure is subtly different from standard Actia racemosa." The observation launched them into a detailed discussion of plant genetics and adaptation. By lunchtime, Lily found herself sharing samples and detailed notes on the preparation methods for her most effective remedies. While Dr. Chen offered insights into similar practices she had documented in other cultures. When James arrived that afternoon for their planned meeting about the research center idea, he found the two women deep in conversation, surrounded by open books, plant specimens, and Lily's notebooks. "James," Lily called, her eyes bright with excitement. "This is Dr. Chen from UNC. She's an ethnobotanist and she thinks my grandmother's black cohosh variant might have unique properties." James introduced himself simply as a friend of Lily's, choosing not to mention his corporate identity. Dr. Chen focused on the plants before her, barely registered his presence beyond a polite handshake. "Ms. Morgan's knowledge is extraordinary," she told him, oblivious to who he was. "The integration of traditional wisdom with practical innovation in her formulations is unlike anything I've documented elsewhere." James caught Lily's eye over the scientist's bent head, raising an eyebrow in a silent, "I told you so." Lily acknowledged it with a small smile before returning to the discussion. By evening, when Dr. Chen finally departed with promises to return soon, the seeds of collaboration had been planted. She had offered Lily access to the university's laboratory facilities to analyze her remedies, while Lily had agreed to document her preparation methods for academic preservation. "Interesting timing," James observed as they watched Dr. Chen's car disappear down the forest road. "Just last night we were discussing a research center, and today a university researcher appears on your doorstep." "Eleanor would call it synchronicity," Lily replied. "The universe bringing together what needs to connect when the time is right." "And is the time right?" James asked, the question encompassing more than just the research proposal. Lily turned to him, her expression softening in the fading light. "I think it might be. For many things." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Lily's phone chimed with a text message breaking the spell. It was from Mayor Thompson, calling an emergency town meeting. The legal challenge against Thornhill had reached a critical juncture. At the town hall, Benjamin Hayes, James's attorney, presented the latest developments. The court had issued a preliminary injunction, halting all Thornhill development activities, while the ownership dispute was resolved. More significantly, the FBI investigation into Victor Reynolds had uncovered evidence of environmental fraud, falsified impact studies that concealed the potential damage the industrial development would cause to the watershed. In light of these revelations, Hayes explained to the packed room, several of the landowners who sold to Thornhill have petitioned to rescind their sales agreements, claiming they were obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation. A murmur of excitement ran through the crowd. For the first time since the threat emerged, victory seemed possible. "There's one more thing," Hayes continued, glancing at James, who nodded permission to proceed. "Mr. Harrington has discovered that Harrington Enterprises holds a minority interest in the parent company that controls Thornhill, an investment made without his knowledge through subsidiaries managed by Victor Reynolds. He has directed me to inform the court that he is exercising his shareholder rights to block any further development plans." The announcement was met with stunned silence, followed by a spontaneous eruption of applause. James, uncomfortable with the attention, remained seated at the back of the room, his expression unreadable. After the meeting concluded, as townspeople celebrated at Sarah's cafe, Lily found James standing alone on the town hall steps, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "You didn't tell me about your ownership stake," she said, joining him. "I only confirmed it yesterday," he replied. Victor had buried it well. "I wanted to be certain before making any announcements." Lily studied his profile in the dim light. "This isn't just business for you anymore, is it?" James turned to her, his customary reserve giving way to something more vulnerable. "It hasn't been just business since the moment you untied me in that clearing." He hesitated, then continued with careful honesty. "I came to Willow Creek as a stranger, was welcomed as a guest, and now find myself wanting to belong. The irony isn't lost on me. I built an empire by prioritizing profit over people, and now I find the only thing of real value is this community that I nearly helped destroy." "You didn't know," Lily reminded him. "That's the problem," he acknowledged. "I didn't know, didn't ask the right questions, didn't look beyond the bottom line. Your grandmother tried to teach me that lesson once. It took losing everything, nearly my life, to finally understand." In the distance, the sounds of celebration drifted from the cafe. Music, laughter. The voices of people who had faced an existential threat together and found new strength in their unity. James and Lily stood in comfortable silence, the weight of the day's revelations settling around them like the first gentle snowflakes of winter that had begun to fall. "What happens now?" Lily finally asked, echoing the question she had posed weeks earlier when James first returned from Atlanta. This time, his answer was different. "Now," he said, taking her hand in his, "we build something new. Together, if you're willing." The snow continued to fall, transforming Willow Creek into a pristine landscape of possibility as they stood on the threshold of a future neither could have imagined. Before their fateful meeting in the autumn forest, spring came to Willow Creek with a burst of renewal that mirrored the transformation of the community itself. 6 months after the town had rallied to defend its heritage, the landscape, both physical and social, had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The morning sun filtered through the new leaves as Lily walked along the path to what locals now called the Institute, a modest complex of buildings nestled at the edge of the forest where her grandmother's cabin once stood alone. The original structure remained at the heart of the campus, preserved as a living museum of Appalachian herbalism, while modern research facilities and educational spaces had been thoughtfully integrated into the surrounding landscape. "Morning, Miss Morgan," called Samuel Jenkins, a local teenager who had become one of the Institute's first student apprentices. He was carefully harvesting young nettle leaves, his hands protected by thick gloves as he worked. "Good morning, Sam," Lily replied with a smile. "Remember to leave at least 2/3 of each plant so it can recover." "Yes, ma'am. Dr. Chen already reminded me twice." Lily continued past the medicinal gardens toward the main building, where a discreet sign read, "The Eleanor Bradford Morgan Institute for Traditional Healing Arts and Innovation." The name had been James's suggestion, a tribute to the woman whose vision had ultimately brought them all together. Inside, the facility hummed with purposeful activity. Local elders worked alongside university researchers, documenting traditional remedies and preparation methods. In the analytical laboratory, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, scientists studied the chemical properties of plants that had been used for healing in these mountains for generations. Dr. Chen looked up from her microscope as Lily entered. "Just in time. We've isolated the compound in your grandmother's black cohosh variant. It's structurally similar to standard black cohosh, but with a molecular difference that might explain its enhanced effectiveness for menopausal symptoms." "Any commercial applications?" Lily asked, falling easily into the vocabulary that had become part of her expanded world. "Potentially, yes, but we'll need more controlled studies before making any claims." Dr. Chen's eyes sparkled with scholarly excitement. "The pharmaceutical partners will want solid evidence." The mention of pharmaceutical partners would have alarmed Lily 6 months ago, raising fears of exploitation and appropriation. Now she understood the careful balance they were creating, a model where traditional knowledge was respected, documented and developed, with benefits flowing back to the community that had preserved it. The Institute operated under a unique charter that James's legal team had crafted, in collaboration with community elders and academic ethicists. Any commercial products developed from Willow Creek's traditional knowledge would direct a significant portion of proceeds to a community trust, funding healthcare, education, and environmental conservation in the region. Speaking of James, Lily checked her watch, realizing she was running late for their meeting with Mayor Thompson. The town council was voting today on zoning changes that would establish a heritage district, protecting Willow Creek's historic character while allowing for sustainable economic development. She found James already waiting outside the town hall, engaged in animated conversation with Sarah, whose cafe had expanded to include a farm-to-table restaurant that showcased local ingredients, including some of the edible herbs identified in Eleanor's journals. "There she is," Sarah said, spotting Lily. "I'll leave you two to your political maneuvering. Just remember your promise about including local businesses in the Heritage District planning." As Sarah departed, James greeted Lily with the warm familiarity that had developed between them over the past months. What had begun as an unlikely alliance had evolved into a partnership that transcended easy categorization. Professional collaborators, certainly, but also friends and, increasingly, something more that neither had rushed to define. "Ready to face the bureaucratic process?" he asked with a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Lily replied. "Public speaking still isn't my favorite thing." "You've become quite good at it," James observed as they climbed the town hall steps. "Your testimony at the State Environmental Commission last month was compelling enough to change the governor's position." Inside, the council chambers were packed with residents eager to participate in decisions that would shape their community's future. The Thornhill threat had awakened a civic engagement that continued to flourish even after the immediate danger passed. Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order, his political instincts having evolved from initial ambivalence to enthusiastic support for the community's new direction. Willow Creek was becoming a model for rural revitalization based on cultural heritage and sustainable innovation, a story that had attracted positive attention and government grants. After the preliminary business, Lily was invited to present the Institute's progress report. Standing at the podium, she looked out at faces that had once been merely neighbors and customers for her remedies, now partners in an enterprise that honored the past while building toward the future. 6 months ago, she began, "We faced the prospect of losing everything that makes Willow Creek special. Today, we're not just preserving our heritage, we're revitalizing it in ways that create opportunities for the next generation." She detailed the Institute's accomplishments: 10 local apprentices learning traditional healing arts, 3 potential patents pending for unique formulations, a thriving educational program that brought visitors from across the country to learn Appalachian herbalism, and the restoration of Eleanor's historic garden to its full glory as a living seed bank of medicinal plants. When James took his turn at the podium, he focused on the economic dimensions. The Institute had created 27 full-time jobs, with more expected as research partnerships expanded. The Heritage Tourism Initiative had increased visitor numbers by 40%, benefiting local businesses without overwhelming the town's character or infrastructure. But the most significant impact, he concluded, has been the creation of a model that other communities can follow, one that values traditional knowledge as intellectual property, ensures benefits flow to knowledge keepers, and creates economic opportunity that enhances rather than exploits local culture. The council voted unanimously to establish the Heritage District, setting in motion the next phase of Willow Creek's evolution. As the meeting adjourned, James received a text message that brought a thoughtful expression to his face. "Everything okay?" Lily asked as they walked out into the spring sunshine. "The board approved my restructuring proposal," he replied. "Harrington Enterprises is officially transitioning to a benefit corporation model, with adjusted metrics that include social and environmental impact alongside financial performance." "That's what you wanted, isn't it?" Lily asked, noting his subdued reaction. "It is." He paused on the town hall steps. "It also means I've committed to a more hands-on role during the transition. I'll need to spend more time in Atlanta over the next few months." The news settled between them, a reminder of the different worlds they still inhabited, despite the bridges they had built. James had maintained his corporate responsibilities while helping Willow Creek, traveling frequently between Atlanta and the mountains. But his presence in town had become a constant that both had perhaps taken for granted. "The Institute will manage without you for a while," Lily said, keeping her tone light. "We've got good systems in place now." "It's not the Institute I'm worried about," James admitted, his gaze meeting hers directly. Before Lily could respond, they were approached by Margaret Jenkins, the retired history teacher who had become the town's unofficial historian, documenting the Thornhill conflict and its resolution for future generations. "Perfect timing," Margaret exclaimed. "I've just finished organizing Eleanor's papers for the archive. There's something I think you both should see." She led them to the small museum that had been established in the town's original post office, now dedicated to preserving Willow Creek's history. In the archive room, Margaret carefully opened a folder containing yellowed papers. "I found these tucked inside one of Eleanor's earliest journals," she explained. "They're letters she wrote to James but apparently never sent, dated from the period just after their business relationship ended." James looked at Lily, silently seeking permission to read this unexpected connection to their shared past. At her nod, Margaret handed him the first letter. "Dear James," he read aloud, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I leave Boston tomorrow with mixed feelings. Our partnership has ended in disappointment, but I cannot regret the years spent nurturing your vision. Perhaps someday you will understand that true wealth cannot be measured in dollars alone, but in the lives improved by our choices and the communities strengthened by our investments." The letter continued, detailing Eleanor's decision to start anew in the mountains of North Carolina, drawn by a newspaper article about a struggling textile community with deep traditions of self-sufficiency and natural healing. She described her hope that distance and time would give James perspective on the values he had compromised in pursuit of success. "I have not given up on you," the letter concluded. "The young man who spoke so passionately about creating businesses that served people's needs while respecting their dignity is still within you, I believe. Perhaps our paths will cross again when that man re-emerges. Until then, I carry the memory of what might have been, both for our enterprise and for us." James carefully returned the letter to its folder, his expression reflective. "She knew," he said softly. "Somehow she knew we would find each other again. Through you." Margaret smiled knowingly as she gathered the papers. Eleanor Bradford Morgan was a remarkable woman with uncommon foresight. We're just beginning to understand how far ahead she was thinking. Left alone in the archive room, James and Lily sat in silence, absorbing the implications of Eleanor's words across decades. "She would be proud of what we've accomplished," Lily finally said. "Of what you've accomplished," James corrected gently. "I'm just trying to make up for lost time to be the man she believed I could be." "And are you?" Lily asked. "That man." James considered the question seriously. "Getting closer, I think. The corporate titan is still there. Those skills are valuable for what we're building. But he's not in charge anymore." He smiled ruefully. "Being tied to a tree in the forest has a way of rearranging one's priorities." The memory of their first meeting brought a shared smile. The distance traveled since that misty autumn morning, almost incomprehensible now. "About Atlanta," Lily said, returning to their interrupted conversation. "How long will you need to be there?" 3 months, maybe 4, to complete the transition and train new leadership. James hesitated, then continued with careful deliberation. "But I've been thinking, the Institute is established now, running smoothly. The legal battles are largely behind us. Maybe it's time for me to ask what you want, Lily, beyond professional collaboration." The directness of the question took her by surprise. They had been circling this conversation for months, both perhaps too cautious to risk the partnership they had built. "What I want," she repeated thoughtfully, "I want to continue my grandmother's work. I want Willow Creek to thrive without losing its soul. I want the Institute to become a model for ethical collaboration between traditional knowledge and modern science." She paused, gathering courage for the personal truth beneath the professional goals. "And I want you to be part of that future, James, not just as a benefactor or business partner, but as—" she searched for the right words, "as whatever we've been becoming to each other these past months." James's expression softened. "Even if that means navigating between two worlds, Your mountains and my boardrooms. Even then, Lily confirmed, we've already proven we can build bridges between worlds that seemed incompatible. Perhaps that's what Eleanor saw in both of us, the ability to honor tradition while embracing necessary change. Outside the museum window, Willow Creek bustled with the energy of renewal. Tourists mingled with locals on the main street, drawn by the town's emerging reputation as a center for traditional healing arts. Student apprentices in the Institute's program carried baskets of fresh herbs toward the research facility. Construction had begun on a small eco-friendly hotel designed to blend with the town's historic architecture while providing modern accommodations for visitors. It was a community transformed not by outside development imposed upon it, but by the conscious choices of its residents to evolve on their own terms, preserving what mattered most while creating new possibilities. As spring sunlight streamed through the archive room windows, James took Lily's hand in his. Perhaps that's our real legacy, not just the institute or the economic model, but demonstrating that progress doesn't have to come at the expense of community or tradition. Eleanor would approve of that interpretation, Lily agreed with a smile. She always believed in finding the third path when presented with false dichotomies. They left the museum hand in hand, stepping into the vibrant life of the town they had helped to reimagine. The journey that had begun with a desperate man bound to a tree and a compassionate healer following her intuition had transformed not just their individual lives, but an entire community's understanding of what was possible. 1 year to the day after their first meeting, James and Lily stood in the forest clearing where she had found him. Now designated as a meditation space within the Institute's grounds, the area had been thoughtfully enhanced with stone benches and native plantings, but the ancient oak remained untouched, a silent witness to the moment that had changed everything. Full circle, James observed, his hand resting on the trunk where ropes had once bound him. Lily nodded, remembering her shock at finding a stranger in her forest. That morning, all I wanted was black cohosh for Mrs. Sullivan's arthritis. Instead, I found you, and saved Willow Creek in the process, though neither of us knew it then. They had developed a tradition of visiting this spot on significant occasions, honoring the synchronicity that had brought them together. Today they came to mark not only their anniversary, but a new beginning. Earlier that morning, the Institute's board had approved their ambitious expansion plan, a network of similar centers in vulnerable communities across Appalachia, each preserving local healing traditions while creating sustainable economic opportunities. Ready for the next chapter? James asked, offering Lily the leather-bound journal he had commissioned from a local artisan, a symbolic continuation of Eleanor's legacy of documentation and wisdom-keeping. Ready, she confirmed, accepting both the journal and the future it represented. Together they left the clearing, walking the path that led back to Willow Creek and forward into possibility. Fim de Historia. Dear listeners, we hope that Lily and James's journey through the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina has moved you as deeply as it has touched us. Their story reminds us that sometimes the most unexpected encounters can lead to profound transformation, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. If you've enjoyed this tale of healing, heritage, and renewal, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories that explore the power of tradition and innovation coming together. Find it by clicking on the link to your left. Did this journey through Willow Creek resonate with you? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video if you want to experience more unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human connection. Every day we bring you original narratives that challenge, inspire, and entertain. Join us tomorrow for another unforgettable story. Until then, we'll be reading your thoughts in the comments section.